This is your emergency World War III update. Now, I got to make this quick because I got better things to do, and quite frankly, you should too. I've been stuck in a tractor. I shouldn't say stuck. It's been quite fun for the last 48 hours, planting all kinds of shrubs and fruit trees and just landscaping, terraforming, formatting the land to make it SHTF proof and SHTF ready, garden beds, laying the foundation for solar, building a greenhouse, digging another well. I mean, the list goes on of the things that we're doing to get prepared and get squared away for what is coming. And it's been a long time coming on the channel that we've finally taken the leap, taken the plunge to becoming a farmer here on Canadian Prepper. And it's a lot of work, and the warehouse has been absolute chaos as well. You know, I got a comment today on the channel before I dive into the news, for which there is a small piece of good news and, as usual, a lot of bad news that my contacts have been providing me. But I got a comment on the channel, and I don't know if they were just being facetious or if they're joking. If they weren't, then I'm quite concerned. And I mean, this is nothing new, but it's just a reminder that most people aren't taking this stuff seriously. Most people just are thinking that the primary purpose of this channel is to be alarmist and to give you the bad news. No, that is really just a delivery system so that we can get you the practical advice that you need. We've had guests in studio now for the past week and in the coming weeks, videos that we're working on that are actually going to provide you value. And we do those videos all the time. People say, why don't you make the blue strip? We always do. You just don't watch them. You just want more bad news. The majority of people anyways, okay? And that just is what it is. For a lot of people, the daily dose of doom and gloom, the emergency updates, that's the primary supplement. It's not supplementary, I should say, as it is for the real hardcore preppers who just want that information so that they can be on the edge and they can be fully apprised of what is going on. But I gotta say, for those of you who aren't taking this seriously, you will die in SHTF. You will die. And maybe you need to be told that so that you get out there and you get motivated. If you are just sitting there salivating every day on bad news and you're not actually taking the practical steps that you need to take, whether it's just getting a little tiny $10 LifeStraw water filter or learning a bit about a certain topic on any given day, and you're spending more time just trying to validate your perspective on how bleak and desperate the situation is, then my friend, you're not going to fare well. And I'm fully aware of my vulnerabilities and limitations, and that is why I'm taking every step I possibly can to get myself squared away for when the rainy days just come and don't stop. Now, in terms of the good news and bad news, the good news is that we are seeing a bit of what I call a strategic reprieve. And what that is that you're seeing a lower intensity of combat operations along the entire front, be it from the east to the Ukraine to the Middle East. While in Ukraine, things are still quite hot. But generally on the whole, there hasn't been a lot of noteworthy events in the last 24 to 48 hours. Now, I say that last year, if any of this stuff that I'm going to talk about happened, it would be big news. But because we've been so normalized to it, it's now really just a nothing burger for a lot of people, which is not to say things aren't escalating, but a strategic reprieve is as such. Essentially, when you're in this current very tense geopolitical environment, whenever we see slow news days, usually that means that big plans are being hatched. You can't, hatch big plans when you're in the middle of a gunfight. Usually on those days when missiles are flying back and forth, I'm kind of like more content because I know that we're in the thick of it and that they're not planning any more big surprises. Right now, that's exactly what's happening. They're planning big surprises. In the coming weeks ahead, the following is going to culminate. What we're seeing right now is that the Russians have now issued an arrest warrant for Volodymyr Zelensky, okay? An arrest warrant. This is the first time they've ever done this, and they're basically going to want him now dead or alive. They no longer believe him to be the legitimate head of state of Ukraine, and what that means is that they're going to go after him. So there's going to be no more Kiev, hosting guests, and, all the big leaders going to meet Zelensky at his palace. Zelensky's going to be in the bunker, or he's either going to be ruling from exile very soon, I do believe. The war is about to get very, very intense. Now, the reason why they're doing this now is because they no longer believe that Zelensky is the legitimate leader because, of course, he's postponed elections. He has imposed martial law. He has imposed more conscription, more strict conscription measures, anybody between the ages of 18 and 60, including having people repatriated who left the country to draft dodge, conducting deals with adjacent countries to send those people back, those fighting age males back, so that they can be sent to the front lines. And so this is going to create a predicament because recently, in the last 48 hours, largely missed by the media, I should say, Emmanuel Macron made the statement that if Ukraine is losing the war, they will intervene directly with troops. Now, this is a big statement, but an even bigger statement was that the UK's defense minister, I believe it's David Cameron, had said, isn't he the defense minister again? It was some guy, some big high up. Basically, it's official that they now are able to utilize the Storm Shadow missile systems and any other UK weapon system to target deep inside Russia. Now, this is going to coincide with the use of F-16s, possibly today or tomorrow. That's when they're going to enter the fray, according to the Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson. So we're seeing all of these things happen at the exact same time. NATO threatening that if you go after Zelensky, we're going to send troops in. The F-16s coming with the Storm Shadows that are going to be utilized to target targets deep inside Russia, namely the Crimean Bridge. And Russia has also issued a response to this, saying that there is going to be a massive retaliation if this is the case, likely in the form of shooting down spy planes. Now, the Ukrainians did request the spy planes that the U.S. has been using in the Black Sea for the last 2.5 years, and they were denied. But usually when they ask for something, usually that's the first step towards getting it, and that means that talks are already in place to give them those systems, because of course, what's going to happen now is that the Russians are going to start shooting those systems down. So if they're in Ukraine's hands, then they can get a little bit close. They can be a bit more ballsy. Those things are easy to shoot down. The Houthis shoot them down. Not easy, but they're easy enough that even the Houthis, with their less sophisticated technology, in certain respects, not in all, are shooting those things down. Right now, you have Poland getting ready to renounce participation in a mine treaty, which basically will permit them to lay landmines along the border with Kaliningrad. You have countries like Latvia putting dragon's teeth and defensive lines along the Russian border. Okay, you have countries like Estonia and Finland calling for blockades and embargoes of Kaliningrad. So you know things are definitely escalating. Maria Zakharova recently threatened the cresting of the NATO Steadfast Defender exercises and criticized them of planning for war with Russia. That Steadfast Defender, as we've been saying all along, is just a disguise. There are no military exercises, only World War III disguises, is a disguise for an actual operation against Russia. This is why Russia has moved several dozen Iskander nuclear weapon systems into Belarus. This is why they've moved nuclear weapon systems close to the border with Finland. This is why the shit's about to hit the fan on that theater, on that front. In terms of what's happening in Israel, it's anybody's best guess. It seems like they're trying to kick that can down the road so they can bring inflation down, try to calm things down so they can manage the price of oil just a little bit. Is the Rafah invasion going to happen? It's likely, but right now there's widespread famine throughout the Gaza Strip. That's why you're seeing people protesting around the country. Of course, the media and I think some people who are co-opting various aspects of the media are trying to make this a left-right issue when it never really was. In fact, at the onset of this crisis, you had a lot of people on the right supporting Palestine, but what they've effectively done with these campus protests is they've now made it a democratic issue, okay? And so they're now trying to pit all of those people who are on the right or some way right adjacent, right leaning, alt-right even, maybe not alt-right, and I guess that's gotten a bad name over the years, but you know what I mean, the more alternative version of the right wing that was a bit more libertarian of sorts. They're trying to turn them against those people who are in support of the plight of the Gazan people and just trying to be show a little bit more equilibrium in their analysis of the Middle Eastern situation. And they're doing this, of course, to divide and conquer, as they always do around election season. The issue will become hyper politicized and you will be told what to think. And already, if you think one way, well, you must be one of those Marxist blah, blah, blah. Just a bunch of narrow-minded bullshit for anybody who has a modicum of nuance in their political, ideological perspectives, all right? There's been several massive fires as of late. Cyber attacks, very likely, of course. NATO is accusing Russia of being behind these attacks. Germany recently had a large weapons manufacturing facility go up in flames. This is on the heels of one happening in the UK as well as the United States. Are these direct attacks by sleeper cells in said countries, or is this a result of a cyber attack on some level or something else? Because it's very likely that a lot of these systems, in our Western complacency, in our new emerging war economy, industrial base, which is probably still quite nascent and naive, that we haven't air-gapped these systems, that security is pretty shitty at a lot of these places because, again, we've just taken our security for granted. And we've done so because, of course, the peace dividend has allowed us to be the top dogs. And the peace dividend being when the Cold War ceased to be, there was a new era of prosperity ushered in because we in the Transatlantic Alliance no longer had to invest as much money in our militaries, at least not in Europe. Of course, the United States did. But with that came a perpetual money printer. So it also reaped benefits for the global reserve currency, which was backed by what up until this point has been the most superior military on the planet. But that, of course, is quickly starting to wane. Now, because of that, we've been very weak. We've been very vulnerable. And I'm not one to be anti-immigration at all, but the porous borders have enabled a free-for-all for sleeper cells. And it really, if they really truly wanted to turn up the hybrid asymmetrical tactics that they're going to utilize in the non-conventional way in the war that's coming, it would be incredibly easy for them to do so. So, and by they, I mean the quadriga of challengers, or as they're more euphemistically called, the axis of evil: Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, the usual suspects, right? Those countries are going to be able to activate their sleeper cells at will, or pay somebody who's poor to go and do something. You know, it might not even be that they're going to actually directly need to do it themselves. There's a lot of broke people who will do things for drugs nowadays, right? And if starting a fire is not very hard because security is low at a lot of these places where they're manufacturing weapon systems or are critical to national security, then they're going to be easy targets. So that has been going on in increasing numbers as of late. We are also, as I talked about, and this is a message from my Polish source, indicated that Polish politicians in the MSM are floating the idea of Poland renouncing adherence to the Ottawa Convention anti-personnel mine ban of 1997. And this is because they want to mine and create a barrier along the boundary of the Kaliningrad exclave, because, of course, things are getting very, very hot there right now. An estimated 370,000 Ukrainian men of draft age currently reside in Poland. And it's quite possible that they will be sent back if they can be found out to Ukraine for service. Some stuff going on in Georgia that I have to look into in a bit more depth. But essentially, Georgia is a much smaller country and of less geopolitical importance than Ukraine. But still, you know, just another spark that is being thrown out, which could exacerbate problems in that neck of the world, and of course just contribute to even more intensification of conflict. Now, the one thing people need to remember about these conflicts is that there's got to be a winner, okay? And this is the fundamental thing to think. When you see these strategic reprieves, the tendency is to believe that things are going to go well now, and maybe you know, the sun is rising, a new day is dawning, and yada yada yada. But unfortunately, that's not the case. There has to be a winner. Nothing has changed since the onset of human civilization 10,000 years ago, much less 100 years ago when the Ruskies got into it with the Nazis, and we also had to get involved and ended up dropping nuclear bombs on a country. Nothing has changed and nothing will change. We're not going to live peacefully in a multipolar world. People need to understand that we're either going to be in a perpetual Cold War, or it's going to get hot and it's going to go nuclear, or someone is going to win somehow, whether it by economic means, by proxy wars of attrition, by some sort of sophisticated cyber attack, or just by getting so much technological dominance in one given area that it has a deterrent aspect and thus elevates one country well beyond others. There has to be a winner. There's not going to be a peaceful coexistence of multipolarity in the world. It's just not going to happen. So that fact in itself, and that is a fact. I mean, there can be exceptions to the rule. There hasn't been any throughout history, any in the sense that there has been two governing bodies that can rule one household being the earth. There's never two tribes that could rule over one area. There was never two governments that could rule over one nation. And there certainly is not going to be multipolar different superpowers that are going to be able to peacefully coexist without living in a permanent state of Cold War, with our finger permanently hovering over the nuclear button. It's just the way it is. So somebody has to win. With that in mind, we know that the conflicts are only going to continue to escalate in the future, and that this is only going to be exacerbated by the more dire fiscal prognosis of not only the American economy, but the global economy as a result of that, and as a result of a war for resources. Many countries right now are starting to divest from the global market, China being one of them, and starting to fill up their own strategic coffers, if you will, of supplies and materiel for a war that might potentially arise. And this actually could be part of the explanation for why everything is getting so expensive, because countries are secretly stockpiling raw materials. The Chinese are one of them, and I'm sure that there are several other countries doing this, and this of course creates more demand for dwindling supply. Now, that's the gist of what's going on. In terms of what you should be doing right now, I mean, there's more news that I'll probably get into in a bit. I wanted to let you guys know that one of the main, going back to the basics of preparedness, because we tend to get off into the weeds in more advanced preparedness topics, which is not to say that I'm an expert in all these issues. It's just to say that when you've done a video on every possible topic there is to prepping, you start to take for granted the things that you're familiar with, but the things that new people to prepping aren't familiar with. The number one thing that I would recommend, the first thing that I would recommend people do, especially if you're on a budget. If you're not on a budget and you have unlimited money to spend, which is not a lot of people nowadays because everything is so damn expensive, you need to do the following. You need to get yourself some Mylar bags like this, okay? You can get, this is a 5-gallon Mylar bag. This is a 2-gallon Mylar bag. This is a 1-gallon Mylar bag. Those are really the main denominations that you're going to want to get. This is a non-porous material that you can seal, and you can throw an oxygen absorber in there, and you can store a lot of food for a long period of time. You pair this with a 5-gallon bucket. So you need your 5-gallon bucket, you need your Mylar bag, you need a few oxygen absorbers, and you get your staple grains. So it could be rice, it could be some type of pasta, could even be top ramen, okay? It could be oats, could be potato flakes, a milk powder as a protein supplement, chickpeas, beans, all of these things you can get from your local wholesale food store. It's going to go by some name. Typically, if you live in a city over 100,000 people, you're going to have a shop like that in your city. I'm not necessarily talking about Costco, although there may be a Costco in your city that has those types of things, but Costco isn't always that cheap or as cheap as people think. You go, you fill up a few bags with those staples, and for really $50, you get yourself a bucket of food that has in combination with other types of foods. You can mix and match beans. This is not going to be necessarily meats, because of course meats are very expensive nowadays, and the only way to really preserve those long-term above and beyond canning would be to get a freeze dryer. But that's going to provide you with a massive amount of calories, and that's the excellent starting point. So if push comes to shove, not only are you going to save a ton on your food bill, because you're going to get the staple out of the way for a fraction of the price that you would at a normal grocery store, but you're going to be squared away, and you can basically, in a small closet, fill that with thousands of, I should say thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not a million calories, just with, 5-gallon pails stacked on top. Okay, you can do it in a very small place. It's very achievable, and if you're on a tight budget, that's the first thing you got to do. Again, I gotta say, man, if you're not taking this stuff seriously, you will die in shit hits the fan. If all you've been doing is just consuming bad news, and I'm assuming that there's some people doing this. Maybe I'm wrong in my assumption. Maybe, because I get these comments from people who are wanting me to go full on just news, and then I get other people who are saying, oh, where's all the practical videos? So you can't please everybody. But what I will say is that please take this opportunity of strategic reprieve and start stocking up, start making those big plans that you're going to have to enact when things get really tough. Another thing to consider is if you're looking for land, okay? Now, you can get some really cheap land, 40 acres, even just 10 acres. Doesn't have to have a house on it. Just has to have something, okay? And usually you can get these parcels of land that are off the beaten path. Maybe you got to drive an hour or so to get to it, and it's not a place that you're going to necessarily live at, but it's a bug out retreat that you can call your own, and usually they're very cheap, because oftentimes, again, and I go back to the inversion principle of preparedness value, and that is that which we seek the most when times are good is going to be what people run away from when times get bad. The house that costs the most now is going to be the least sought after house when the proverbial hits the fan. Okay, so what I mean by that is, if you look at the most expensive house in the United States right now is a $250 million property in the southern part of Florida, out on this Richie Rich peninsula. Absolute last place you're going to want to be when the crap hits the fan, not only because, of course, it's a high population density, never mind the gated community. They're not going to be able to keep the angry, starving people out. You also have to deal with piracy and in that situation when you're living on the coast. Anyways, on the flip side, you can go out and get a quarter section of land, that's what we call it here in Canada, 160 acres in some spots for 6 figures, $100,000 in certain places. Now, it's not going to be the prettiest piece of land, but it's going to be a piece of land, okay, that you can go, you can set up a trailer on, you can set up a tiny home on. It might not even have a lot of critical infrastructure on it. You might have to plumb a lot of stuff in, but it's a starting point. So all I'm saying is, please pair this stuff with practical how-to stuff. Enough of the lecture. Let's get back to the news. I think that's really all the news there is today, to be brutally honest. I mean, they're going to take out Zelensky, and that's going to bring the West into the war. They're saying that they're going to retaliate against the West once they take out the Crimean Kerch Bridge. And that's basically the end of it, guys. I mean, what more do you need to know? They're claiming that NATO is using the war games to prepare for a conflict with Russia. Let's quit beating that dead horse and let's get to prepping. Thanks for watching, and if you need any Mylar bags, use coupon code MYLAR for 15% off Mylar bags at Canadian Preparedness. And if you want some of the more fancy dancy expensive stuff, you can get that there as well. We're talking freeze dryers, freeze-dried food, and like 5,000 other preparedness products. Everything you could possibly need under one roof. Go check it out, my friends. Take care. That's all I got for you today. See you on the flip side. Canadian Prepper out.